What are you doing with your life right now, at this exact moment? And be honest with yourself, because this question is not meant to be comfortable. It is meant to wake you up. How many days have you watched pass by, telling yourself that tomorrow you will start? Tomorrow you will be brave. Tomorrow you will finally take that first step toward the thing you know you are supposed to be building. You are sitting there with dreams inside of you that have not moved in months, maybe years. And the world keeps spinning, and the clock keeps ticking, and nothing is changing, because you are still waiting for the perfect moment that is never going to come on its own. Welcome. You have found a place called English to Inspire. And this is not just a place to learn English. This is a place where your language grows and your mind grows at the same time. Because real learning happens when you are emotionally connected to what you are hearing. And right now, you are going to be very connected to this story. If this kind of content speaks to your soul and sharpens your English at the same time, then take 1 second right now and subscribe to this channel, because what is coming next is going to change the way you see yourself and the world around you. Today you are going to hear the story of a young woman who was born with every advantage and still managed to feel invisible, who grew up in front of millions of eyes and still felt completely alone inside, who was mocked and criticized and reduced to a joke by people who did not know her and who still chose to rise. Not with noise, not with revenge, but with work. And that woman is Kylie Jenner. And before you roll your eyes or make a judgment, I need you to understand something important. Her story is not about fame or money or makeup. It is about what a human being can build when they decide to stop letting pain be a prison and start letting it be a fuel. You may think her life was easy because of the family she was born into. And I understand why you think that, because from the outside it looks like she was handed everything. But the truth is more complicated and more painful than the highlight reel you saw on television. And that is exactly what makes her story so powerful for you right now. Because you are also living a version of life that looks one way on the outside and feels completely different on the inside. And that gap between how things look and how they feel is exactly where greatness either dies or is born. She was not born a billionaire. She was born a girl with fears, with insecurities, with a face the whole world decided to have an opinion about, before she was even old enough to understand what was happening to her. And she had to make a choice about what to do with all of that weight. And the choice she made is the reason we are talking about her today. And the reason her story matters to you is because you are going to face the same choice. Maybe you already are facing it right now. Imagine being 8 years old and already knowing that your life is not private, that cameras follow your family everywhere, that the world has opinions about your mother, your sisters, your home, your clothes, and slowly, inevitably, about you. And imagine growing up inside that reality, not as something that started when you were an adult and could protect yourself, but as the only life you have ever known, as the air you breathed from the very beginning. Because that was the reality of Kylie Kristen Jenner. Born on August 10th, 1997, the youngest child in one of the most watched families in the history of television. The Kardashian-Jenner family was not simply famous. They were a phenomenon, a cultural force that divided people sharply between obsession and contempt. And inside that force, inside that storm of cameras and opinions and magazine covers and reality show confessionals, there was a little girl who was trying to figure out who she was, while millions of strangers were already deciding for her. And that is a kind of pressure that most people will never understand. Because most people get to make their mistakes in private. Most people get to be awkward and uncertain and unfinished without an audience. But Kylie never had that luxury. Not even once. Her older sisters were already dominant personalities by the time Kylie was old enough to understand the dynamics of her own family. Kim was the beauty. Kourtney was the serious one. Khloe was the funny and fierce one. Kendall was becoming a model. And Kylie was somewhere in the middle of all of that, trying to find her shape, trying to find her voice, trying to understand what made her different and valuable and worth paying attention to. And when you are the youngest in a family of giants, that search for identity is not just difficult, it is almost invisible, because everyone is always looking at the people who came before you. There is a particular kind of loneliness that comes from being surrounded by people and still feeling unseen. And that was the quiet pain that lived inside Kylie's early years. Not poverty, not abandonment, but invisibility inside a crowd. The feeling that everyone around you has already figured out who they are while you are still standing in the hallway wondering which room belongs to you. And if you have ever felt that way in your own life, in your family, in your school, in your job, then you already understand more about Kylie Jenner's beginning than most people who have followed her for years. What the cameras captured was the surface, the big house, the famous name, the glamorous events. But what the cameras could not capture was the internal world of a young girl absorbing criticism before she had the emotional tools to process it, building walls before she knew why she needed them, learning to perform confidence before she actually felt any. And this is the part of the story that matters most, because the foundation of everything she would later build was not laid in a boardroom or a beauty studio. It was laid in the quiet, painful, invisible years of simply trying to survive growing up inside a world that never once looked away. There is a specific kind of cruelty that the internet discovered it was capable of sometime around the early 2010s, a cruelty that was new in human history because it was massless and weightless, and could travel at the speed of light and land directly on the face of a 14-year-old girl sitting alone in her bedroom. And Kylie Jenner experienced that cruelty in a way that was so public and so relentless and so personal that it would have broken most adults, let alone a teenager who was still trying to understand her own reflection in the mirror and decide whether she liked what she saw. Looking back at her, the attacks were not about her character or her choices or anything she had actually done. They were about her face, her lips, her body, the way she looked, the way she was changing as she grew. And the internet decided that every change was a flaw, every development was a mistake, every photograph was an invitation to compare and criticize and reduce her to a collection of physical features that were never going to be good enough for people who had already decided they did not like her. And she absorbed all of that during the years when a young person is most fragile, most uncertain, most desperate for belonging and acceptance and the simple feeling of being enough. She has spoken about this period in her life with a rawness that is uncomfortable to hear, describing how the commentary about her lips made her deeply self-conscious, how she would overline them with lip liner just to feel less insecure when she looked at photographs of herself, how the thing that millions of strangers mocked became the thing she obsessed over privately. Not because she was vain, but because she was wounded, because words have weight, even when they come from people who do not know you, and sometimes, especially then, because a stranger's cruelty carries a particular coldness that cuts in a different way than the cruelty of someone who loves you. Think about what you were like at 14 or 15 or 16 years old, and think about how certain you were of yourself, how solid your identity felt, how prepared you were to absorb the judgment of millions of people commenting on your physical appearance every single day. And if you are honest with yourself, the answer is that you were not prepared at all. Because nobody is. Because that is not something a human being is built to endure. And yet Kylie endured it. Not gracefully at first, not without damage. But she endured it. And the fact that she did not disappear, the fact that she did not collapse, is itself a form of quiet and underrated strength that deserves recognition. What happened inside her during those years was not visible to anyone watching the show or scrolling through the comments, but something was forming beneath the surface, something hard and patient and focused, the way a diamond forms not in comfort but under unimaginable pressure. And the pain of those years did not leave her empty. It left her with something to prove, not to the world, not to the people who had laughed at her, but to herself. And that is the most dangerous kind of motivation that exists, the kind that is completely internal and completely unstoppable. And it was about to find its direction. There is a moment in every person's life, and I mean every single person, where they are standing at a crossroads that does not look dramatic from the outside, but is absolutely defining on the inside. A moment where one road leads to shrinking, to hiding, to letting the pain write the final story, and the other road leads to something terrifying and uncertain and alive. And that moment came for Kylie Jenner. Not with fireworks or a great speech, or a sudden burst of confidence, but quietly, privately, in the form of a simple and almost embarrassingly personal idea that she was too insecure about her lips to stop thinking about them. So what if she did something about it? The idea was not born in a business school classroom or inside a meeting with investors or after reading a book about entrepreneurship. It was born directly from her wound, directly from the thing that had caused her the most public embarrassment and private suffering. And that is the detail that I need you to hold on to right now, because it is the most important lesson in this entire story. The thing that hurt her the most became the thing that built her the most. And that is not a coincidence. That is a pattern. That is a law of human transformation that appears again and again in the lives of people who actually change their circumstances instead of just complaining about them. She was not thinking about building a cosmetics empire when she started experimenting with lip products. She was thinking about herself, about her own insecurity, about finding something that made her feel more like the version of herself she wanted to see in the mirror. And that authenticity, that deeply personal connection to the product she was developing, was the invisible ingredient that no competitor could copy and no marketing budget could manufacture. Because when you create something that solves your own real pain, you understand that pain better than anyone else in the room. And that understanding becomes your greatest competitive advantage without you even realizing it. She was 17 years old when she began working seriously on what would become the Kylie Lip Kit, not waiting until she had a degree, not waiting until someone gave her permission, not waiting until the critics stopped talking about her. And this is where I need you to feel uncomfortable for a moment, because 17 years old is young, and maybe you are older than that right now and you are still waiting, still preparing, still telling yourself that you are not ready. And I want you to sit with that discomfort, because readiness is a lie that your fear invented to keep you exactly where you are. The decision Kylie made was not a decision about lipstick. It was a decision about identity. A declaration that she was going to stop being the object of other people's stories and start being the author of her own. And that shift, that fundamental internal shift from passive to active, from victim to creator, from waiting to building, is the shift that separates the people who talk about their dreams from the people who actually construct them with their hands. And it is available to you right now, today, not tomorrow, not when you feel more confident, not when the circumstances are better, but right now, in whatever room you are sitting in as you hear these words. On November 30th, 2015, something happened that the business world was not fully prepared to understand or explain. A 17-year-old girl with no formal business training, no manufacturing experience, no retail distribution network, and no traditional advertising campaign put 900 lip kits on the internet for sale and watched every single one of them disappear in less than a minute. Not in an hour, not in a day, in less than 60 seconds. And the servers crashed from the demand, and the waiting list exploded, and the beauty industry, which had been dominated for decades by large corporations with massive budgets and teams of experts, suddenly had to ask itself a question it did not know how to answer, which was, how did this happen, and why did we not see it coming? The answer was so simple that it made the experts uncomfortable, because simple answers have a way of making complicated people feel foolish. And the answer was this: Kylie had something that no corporation could buy, and no marketing team could manufacture. She had a real audience of real people who genuinely trusted her, who had watched her grow up, who had followed her through the awkward years, and the criticism, and the transformation. And when she showed them something she had made from a place of personal truth, they did not need to be convinced. They did not need a television commercial or a celebrity endorsement. They needed only to see that it was real and that it came from her, and that was enough. This is the lesson that most people hear and do not truly absorb, because they hear it and they think it is about social media followers or about being famous. And they tell themselves that it does not apply to them because they are not famous and they do not have millions of followers. But that is the wrong reading of the lesson. The right reading is this: authenticity is currency. Trust is an asset. And the relationship you build with people over time through honesty and consistency and genuine vulnerability is worth more than any advertising budget ever printed. And you do not need millions of followers to apply this principle. You need the courage to be real with the people who are already paying attention to you. She reinvested immediately. She did not celebrate for long. She did not let the success become a reason to slow down. She used the momentum and the revenue from that first launch to produce more, to improve the formula, to expand the shades, to build the infrastructure that a real company requires. And this is the part of the story that gets left out of the highlight reel because it is not glamorous. It is not photogenic. It is just the grinding daily work of someone who had tasted what was possible and had decided that she wanted more of it, not for the fame, but because building something real had given her a feeling that nothing else in her life had ever given her before. That feeling was competence, the deep and quiet satisfaction of knowing that you made something, that you identified a problem, that you created a solution, that real people exchanged real money for something that came from your hands and your mind and your experience. And competence is addictive in the best possible way because once you feel it, you cannot unfeel it, and you cannot go back to the version of yourself that did not know it was possible. And Kylie Jenner crossed that line on November 30th, 2015, and she was never the same person again. And the question sitting in the air right now is whether you are ready to cross your own line and what exactly is stopping you from doing it. Most people look at a successful company and see the result. They see the polished website, and the beautiful packaging, and the celebrity partnerships, and the revenue numbers, and they construct a story in their minds about how it all came together effortlessly, how the right people showed up at the right time and the right decisions were made almost automatically. And they use that imagined effortlessness as evidence that the person who built it is fundamentally different from them, touched by luck or talent or circumstance in a way that makes comparison pointless. But that story is a comfortable lie that protects you from the terrifying truth, which is that behind every polished result, there is an unglamorous, repetitive, exhausting, and deeply human process of daily decision-making that looks nothing like the highlight reel. Kylie Cosmetics did not scale itself. It was scaled by a young woman who was simultaneously managing her public image, her family obligations, her personal life, and the 10,000 invisible details that come with building a real business from the ground up. Decisions about suppliers and formulas and packaging and pricing, and restocking timelines, and customer complaints, and social media strategy, and legal structures, and financial management, and she was doing all of this while the world was still primarily interested in her as a character in a reality television show, rather than as a serious operator of a growing company, which added a layer of psychological difficulty that most entrepreneurs never have to face, the difficulty of being taken seriously in a room that has already decided what category you belong in. She built the business with a team that was small by industry standards, leaning heavily on her mother, Kylie Jenner, as a manager and business partner. And there are people who use this fact to diminish what she built, arguing that she had help that others do not have. But this argument misunderstands something fundamental about business, which is that identifying the right partners, trusting the right people, knowing what you are good at and what you need help with, these are themselves skills. These are themselves forms of intelligence. And the ability to build a team and leverage relationships is not a shortcut around entrepreneurship. It is a core part of what entrepreneurship actually is. The product line expanded methodically. Lip kits became lip glosses, became eyeshadow palettes, became highlighters, became a full cosmetics range. And each expansion was driven not by a random desire to grow, but by a close attention to what her audience was asking for, what they were responding to. What gaps existed between what they wanted and what the market was currently offering them. And this customer obsession, this habit of listening more than speaking and observing more than performing, was one of the most underrated disciplines in her entire operation. Because the brands that grow are almost always the brands that are genuinely paying attention to the people they serve. The numbers that eventually emerged from this process were staggering in a way that forced even the most skeptical observers to reconsider their assumptions. And by 2018, Kylie Cosmetics was valued at close to $900 million, a figure that represented not luck, not inheritance, not the automatic dividend of being born into a famous family, but the compounded result of a series of daily choices made by someone who decided that the distance between where she was and where she wanted to be was something she was personally responsible for closing. One decision, one product, one day at a time. And that responsibility, that ownership of your own outcome, is something that no famous last name can give you and no difficult circumstance can take away. There is a tax that comes with visible success that nobody warns you about when you are building. A tax that is not paid in money, but in energy and attention and emotional resilience. And the tax is this: the bigger you become, the more people feel entitled to have an opinion about you. And the more successful you become, the more motivated certain people are to find reasons why your success is not real, not earned, not legitimate. And Kylie Jenner paid this tax at a scale that is almost impossible to comprehend, because she did not just become successful. She became one of the most recognized and most debated young businesswomen on the entire planet. And with that visibility came a volume of criticism that would have silenced most people before they ever got started. The attacks on her legitimacy were constant, and they came from every direction. From journalists who argued that she was not a real entrepreneur but simply a famous person who put her name on products made by other people. From feminists who debated whether her brand of beauty was empowering or damaging. From financial analysts who questioned the valuation of her company. From ordinary people on the internet who made it a personal mission to prove that everything she had was handed to her, and that none of it required real work or real intelligence or real sacrifice. And the noise of all of that criticism was not background noise. It was foreground noise. It was loud and persistent and specifically designed to make her doubt herself. And here is what she did in response to all of it. She worked. She did not write long defensive posts explaining herself. She did not spend her energy arguing with strangers about her legitimacy. She did not wait for the critics to change their minds before she allowed herself to move forward. She simply kept building, kept launching, kept expanding, kept showing up in the arena, while the people criticizing her were sitting in the stands. And over time, the results became so undeniable that the conversation had to change. Not because people stopped having opinions, but because the evidence made certain opinions increasingly difficult to defend with a straight face. This is one of the most important lessons that her story offers you, and it is a lesson that is almost impossible to learn from a book or a classroom because it has to be felt in your body during the actual experience of being doubted, which is this: you do not need the approval of your critics to continue. You do not need the people who doubt you to believe in you before you take the next step. You do not need the world to validate your vision before you execute it. Because if you wait for external validation to begin or to continue, then you have given the people who want you to fail a veto, power over your life that they do not deserve and that you cannot afford to give them. Think about the critics in your own life right now. The people who have told you that your idea is too big, or your background is wrong, or your timing is off, or your resources are too small. And think about how much of your mental energy you have spent trying to prove them wrong or win their approval or convince them to see what you see. And now, consider the possibility that all of that energy was misdirected. That the only response to a critic that actually means anything is a result. That the only argument worth making is the one you make with your actions over time. And that the clock is ticking right now. While you are reading their comments and crafting your responses, instead of building the thing that will make the comments irrelevant, there is a specific moment in a person's life that reorganizes everything, that reaches inside you and rearranges your priorities without asking your permission. That makes the things you thought were important suddenly feel small and makes the things you ignored suddenly feel enormous. And for Kylie Jenner, that moment came on February 1st, 2018, when she became a mother at 20 years old, giving birth to her daughter Stormy Webster. And the world that had spent years reducing her to a face and a lip color and a revenue number suddenly became secondary to a reality. So immediate, and so physical, and so demanding that nothing else could compete with it. Because a newborn baby does not care about your brand valuation, or your follower count, or your quarterly revenue. A newborn baby cares only that you are present and warm and completely there. She had kept the pregnancy almost entirely private, in a way that shocked people who had assumed that every detail of her life was public property, withdrawn from social media for months, refusing to confirm or deny what was happening, protecting something for the first time in her life with a completeness that she had never been able to protect anything before. And that decision, that fierce and deliberate choice to keep something sacred and away from public consumption, said something profound about how motherhood was already changing her before Stormy even arrived. Because it was the first time she had drawn a line between what belonged to the world and what belonged only to her. Becoming a mother at 20 is not easy for anyone, regardless of their financial situation. Because money can buy comfort and support and resources, but it cannot buy the emotional experience of suddenly being responsible for a life that is completely dependent on you. Completely vulnerable, completely trusting in a way that adults never trust each other. And Kylie has spoken openly about the fear and the overwhelm of those early months, about the way it cracked her open and made her feel things she had never felt before, about the way it connected her to a sense of purpose that was deeper and more stable than anything she had found in business success or public recognition or the approval of an audience. What motherhood gave her was not softness, it gave her gravity, a weight and seriousness of purpose that transformed the hunger she had always felt for building into something more meaningful than personal achievement. Because now she was building for someone. Now every decision had a layer of consequence that extended beyond herself. Now, the legacy question. The question of what she was leaving behind, and what kind of world she was creating for the person she loved most, became not an abstract philosophical exercise, but an urgent and daily reality that shaped how she spent her time, and energy and attention in ways that pure ambition alone had never been able to shape them. The business continued to grow after Stormy's birth, but the relationship Kylie had with it changed. Because she was no longer building to prove something to the critics or to escape the memory of being mocked, or to establish an identity in the shadow of her famous family. She was building because she understood now that the choices she made every day were teaching her daughter something about what women are capable of, about what is possible when you refuse to accept the ceiling that other people try to place above your head. And that is the kind of motivation that does not burn out, that does not get tired, that does not need a motivational video to keep going. Because it is rooted in love, and love is the most durable fuel that a human being possesses. Strip away the cameras, and the magazine covers, and the social media following, and the cosmetics empire, and the famous family, and the houses, and the cars, and sit with what remains. Sit with the bare bones of this human story. And what you find underneath all of that surface is something remarkably simple and remarkably universal. A person who was hurt, who was seen in the worst possible way, at the worst possible time, who felt invisible, and then felt overexposed, and who somehow found in that contradiction the raw material for something real. And the reason her story matters to you is not because you want to be her or because you admire the lifestyle or because you follow beauty trends. It is because the pattern underneath her story is the same pattern that is available to you right now, in your own life, with your own pain and your own platform and your own unbuilt thing. The first principle underneath her story is that your wound is not your weakness. Your wound is your direction. Because Kylie did not build a lip empire, despite her insecurity about her lips. She built it because of that insecurity. She built it from the exact center of the thing that had caused her the most pain. And this is not a coincidence, and it is not unique to her. It is a pattern that appears in the lives of builders and creators and changers throughout human history. The person who was told they could not speak becomes the greatest communicator. The person who grew up without money becomes obsessed with financial freedom. The person who felt unloved builds communities of belonging. And your pain, the specific shape of your particular suffering, is pointing you toward the specific contribution only you can make. The second principle is that platform is not about size. It is about truth, because Kylie's audience did not follow her because she was perfect, or because she was the most talented, or because she had the best products in the world. They followed her because she was real about something, because there was a thread of genuine human experience running through her public presence that connected with people who recognized something of themselves in her struggle. And you have that same capacity for realness right now. You have a story that is true, and a perspective that is specific, and an experience that belongs only to you. And that is a platform. Maybe not a platform with millions of followers yet, but a platform with the most important ingredient already present, which is authenticity. The third principle is that timing is a choice disguised as a circumstance. Because Kylie did not wait until the criticism stopped to begin building. She did not wait until she felt confident to launch her first product. She did not wait until the world decided to take her seriously before she started doing serious work. And the people who are waiting for the right moment to begin are making a decision they do not recognize as a decision. They are choosing to let time pass while telling themselves that they are simply being patient or realistic or responsible. But patience without action is not a virtue. It is a very slow and very comfortable form of giving up. The fourth and final principle is the one that connects all the others, and it is the simplest and the hardest and the one that no one can do for you, which is that transformation requires a decision that you make alone, in private, without applause, without guarantee, without certainty about the outcome. A decision that says, I am going to stop being a person who waits and start being a person who builds. And that decision is not made once. It is made every single morning when the alarm goes off and the excuses are already lined up, and the comfort of staying still is louder than the call to move. And the question that has been sitting underneath every word of this story from the very beginning is whether you are ready to make that decision today. So here we are, at the end of her story and the beginning of yours. And I want you to feel the weight of that sentence, because it is not a poetic phrase designed to sound nice at the end of a video. It is a literal and urgent truth that deserves your full attention right now, because everything you have heard today has been building toward this single moment. This moment where the story stops being about Kylie Jenner and starts being about you, about the thing you have been putting off, about the dream you have been keeping small so that it cannot disappoint you, about the version of yourself that you have been promising to become since a time you can no longer remember clearly. Kylie Jenner was mocked, and she built anyway. She was doubted, and she launched anyway. She was underestimated, and she scaled anyway. She was hurt, and she created anyway. And the word that connects all of those sentences is not her name. The word that connects all of those sentences is anyway. And that word is the entire philosophy. That word is the complete instruction manual. That word contains everything you need to understand about what separates the people who transform their lives from the people who spend their lives describing the transformation they are planning to make someday when everything is finally ready and perfect and safe. What is the thing in your life right now that you have been approaching with the word someday instead of the word today? What is the business you have not started? What is the conversation you have not had? What is the skill you have not built? What is the boundary you have not set? What is the first step you have not taken? And why? Why is that thing still sitting in the future tense, when the only tense that actually exists, the only tense where real things happen, is the present, is right now, is this exact moment that is already passing as you sit there listening and nodding and feeling inspired without moving. Inspiration without action is just entertainment. And I did not tell you this story to entertain you. I told you this story to disturb you, to make you uncomfortable in the specific way that precedes change, to put a mirror in front of you and make it impossible to look away from what you see, because you are capable of more than you are currently doing, and you know it. You have always known it, and the knowing without the doing is its own kind of pain. A slow and quiet pain that grows heavier every year that passes without movement. The clock that was ticking when this story began is still ticking right now, and it has not slowed down, and it will not slow down, and it does not care about your fears, or your doubts, or your reasons, or your history. It only moves forward, always forward. And the only question that remains, The only question that has ever mattered from the very first word of this story to this very last one is what you are going to do next. Not tomorrow. Not after you feel ready. Not when the conditions improve. But now, right now. In the next hour. In the next decision. In the next moment where you choose between the person you have been and the person you are capable of becoming. The world is waiting for you. Do not make it wait any longer.